Who do you to go, boy?
Yo, what's good, friends? It's Hacks coming to you with yet another Wonderlands build video. And today, guys, I am super fucking stoked to be sharing this one with you. This build has changed more than any build I've ever made. This is actually one of the first Wonderlands builds I ever put together way back in the beginning, back at launch, and it's just completely different now. I'm really pleased with all of the steps that we've taken to get it to this point. I love where it is currently, so I'm super stoked to bring it to you today in its hopefully final form. But before we get into that, I do want to say that there's a lot of interactions going on with this build. There's a lot of different ways to play it. The diversity is one of the main selling points, in my opinion, for this build. So I'm going to try to go through the video a little quick. Keep in mind you can pause, screenshot things if you need to, but it's going to be a little bit different the way we run through this compared to the way we've run through videos before. What's not different, however, is the shameless self-plug opportunity. So please keep in mind that we stream 4 days a week over at twitch.tv/H4XZZHD. You'll find that link down there in the subscription. We'd love to have you hang out with us. Also, I have failed to do this in previous videos, but we are going to put a Discord link in the description as well. It's going to be an open access Discord link, so if you like what you see here, you want to be a part of a Wonderlands community, hang out with some chill people, have some good times, you'll have that link available to you. But without further ado, let me stop running my big mouth and let's get into this build. Alright, now I know I said I was going to be quick here, but there are some contextual things we need to talk about before we dive into the items or the skill trees for this build. The first thing we need to talk about is speed versus proximity. Now, in this build, there are a lot of things that are going to give you bonus damage towards being A, close to the enemy, and B, moving as fast as you can around the enemy. So ideally, let's say Dragon Lord here. We're going to use him as our test subject. Dragon Lord here is our bad guy. If you're moving around him and you're striking with melee, like this, you're going to be doing a whole hell of a lot more damage than if you're just right up on him standing still striking with melee. Alright, so again, movement speed, the more I'm moving, the faster I'm moving, the more damage I'm going to do. Alright. And proximity, if I'm right up on him, I'm going to be doing more damage than if I'm over here with the face puncher shooting him. Now, that's not to say the face puncher is irrelevant, but we'll come back to that later. So you'll notice when we go through these skill trees, there are a lot of things that talk about making your character move faster, giving you better proximity damage. So again, I want to make sure that you're aware of that element of the build before you get far away from an enemy and you're shooting them and trying to kill them and you're seeing far less DPS than you were if you were like right up close smacking them. I just want to make sure that that's evident. The next thing we want to talk about is how melee and spell damage work for this build. Now, we are using a Spellblade, and Spellblade's text explicitly states that you will be doing spell damage instead of melee damage. Like, it implies that there's a complete conversion there. That is not true. That is not true. Both melee and spell damage both apply to this build in terms of how damage is calculated. So you want to make sure you're buffing into both. You don't want to prioritize one over the other. So if you got melee here and you're rolling for melee on the next thing, but it goes spell damage, chances are you're going to be okay. All right. So melee and spell damage both factor into the damage calculations for this build. They both work very, very well. I recommend diversifying between the two, but at the end of the day, that's entirely up to you. But yeah, all right. Moving on to the third thing. All right, the third thing we want to talk about is cooldown. Now, it's not going to work here because we're not in a real combat scenario, but let's say again, Dragon Lord's our bad guy. We're going to cast our Buffmeister, all right? Cast second charge, and you'll notice the cooldown here. Now, there's a particular enchant that we'll talk more about here in a second that when you kill an enemy with melee, whether that's with the Stabbo-matic, whether that's with your traditional melee, whether that's with your Ghost Blade, it doesn't matter what you kill them with. If you kill them with melee, it's going to recharge your Buffmeister, which effectively means you're going to get to cool down your Buffmeister and use it over and over and over and over and over again. And you're going to want to. You'll notice in some of the clips that I used for the introduction, you're going to see me casting Buffmeister over and over and over again. That's to monopolize. Like I said, it's been a long day. That's to monopolize on spellcast enchantments. Also, we're using a Thurge, so the more spells we cast, the faster we get back our action skill. We also have action skill enchantments. Ghostblade does crazy things. Long story short, you're going to see a lot of really, really quick cooldown with your spells, and subsequently a lot of really quick cooldown with your action skills. You're going to want to take advantage of both of those. So just note that with this build, you're going to have to, I guess, be a little bit active would be the way to put it. You're going to have to keep an eye on your Buffmeister. You're going to have to keep an eye on your Ghostblade or your Hammer or your From the Shadows, whatever the case may be. And you're going to want to be using them as much as possible because, again, the more you use your action skill, the more you use your spell, the more buffs you're going to get, the stronger the build's going to be. So yeah, I think, as sloppy as that was, that covers the context. So we're going to say sayonara to our buddy the old Dragon Lord, and we are going to hop right on into some skill tree dissection. Alright, so let's talk about these here skill trees, shall we? Alright, so the first thing we're going to want to look at is our Stabbomancer side. Now, with regards to your particular action skill, we're not going to really focus on this too much because as you saw in the intro, we can run Ghostblade, we can run From the Shadows, we can run Dreadwind. We can pretty much run anything we want. It doesn't matter. I personally prefer Ghostblade. If you want more of like a Moxie Volt Viper feel, you can go for From the Shadows. If you want to like completely switch it up, you can run Dreadwind. It really is up to you. However you feel you want to play the build, that's part of the beauty of this. You can do it however you want to. There are some things, however, that are going to be pretty, for lack of a better way to put it, standard. One of those things being Arsenal. 5 into Arsenal gives us 15 across the board in melee, spell, and gun damage. Gun damage doesn't really do anything for us here, but melee and spell damage both help us, so we want that 15%. We're going to quickly glance over the haste swift death combo here. As I've mentioned in previous build vids, if you put too many points into haste, you're going to undermine the effect you get out of swift death, so you really want to just stick with 1-2 points maximum in haste. I would recommend 1. and then putting 5 into Swift Death so you get that movement speed bonus. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the more you're moving around, the faster you're moving, the more damage you're going to deal. This is an elemental build, so 3 points into potent poisons. We're also putting 3 points into exploit their weaknesses. I really don't see many builds with Stabbo where this is a bad go to. It's pretty much slag. You're going to be dealing elemental damage, and when you deal elemental damage, you're going to be dealing more damage on top of that. So why not? One thing that I don't normally run in my builds is Shadow Step. The reason we're running Shadow Step here is because we're not intrinsically running from the shadows, so we can't guarantee ourselves crit hits. So with our hero points and with some of our skill tree, we have buffed crit chance so that we get crits more often. This is one of those options. We are running Nimble Fingers because we're dealing melee damage all of the time. Fire rate is great, but spell damage is what we're after here. So we're getting 24% spell damage bonus. That in the calculations works with the melee damage and our spell blade to give us a much higher damage output, so this is a no-brainer. No points into sneak attack. It really doesn't help you in this instance, nor does elusive. However, contagion does still help in terms of spreading all of that elemental love all over the place. You only really need 1 point here to make it work, though. It was not something we wanted to max out, so we put 1 point here. Now, alchemical agent is interesting. It says it gives you 10% of melee damage dealt. That is not accurate. The bonus damage that alchemical agent gives you in terms of status effect damage is far greater than 10%. The one downside here is that it applies a random status effect, and since we're using soaked, it can give you like fire, which not desirable. But, if it gives you poison, anything other than fire, it's really not that big of a deal. But if it gives you fire, you're taking a little bit of a hit on damage, but not so much because you've got so many buffs coming in from other places. So, really, Alchemical Agent is a great buff, especially if you happen to spread some shock and some cryo around. If you get fire, whatever. We're not really running the capstones, even though the capstones would be great. Of course, Blood of the Fallen's fantastic. And when you look at Executioner's Blade, this is really great too because we're using Spell Blade. So just like Ghost Blade, you're getting bonus from your skill setup and from your items to Executioner's Blade. But we're not really doing a whole lot of gun and spell critical hits, so there's not really a reason to use this here. Now, if we move over into the skill tree for the Berserker, we are putting 4 points into Ancestral Frost. I was going to put 5 points here, but I really felt like 3 into Potent Poisons would be better. But we're getting frost damage at 16% bonus, which is great. We're doing a lot of frost damage. That's a fairly consistent thing that this build will put out. So 16% is nothing to shake a stick at. It's a melee build, and Enrage is nice. So we've got 30% here with 5 points into Savagery as far as melee damage goes, and we've got 5 seconds on our Enrage duration. Icebreaker. Icebreaker's fucking phenomenal. I feel like anybody that's watched a Moxie video will know why, so I'm going to spare you all the details. But up to 60% bonus damage against frozen enemies with the build doing what it does, it's a no-brainer. We got 3 from our class mod. We've got 3 in the skill, so absolutely fantastic. Now, the old ways. We do have a Tides class mod, which that's Precursor, the class mod we're using for this build that gives us +5 into the old ways. You're going to want 5 into it regardless because, again, like we've mentioned before, the closer you are to an enemy, the more damage you're doing to the enemy. And there's no penalty to sort of like run circles around an enemy, melee thwacking them. So why not? I mean, it's bonus damage. Cold Snap is also a great skill to have. We're getting movement speed, which again works here with Swift Death. But also, in addition to movement speed, we're getting frost efficiency, so the likelihood of them being frozen or slowed is better, which works all around with a lot of the other skills we've already talked about. So, for that reason, we're putting maximum points here. The only other place we're putting points here is in Blast Chill. And we're putting points into Blast Chill because Blast Chill comes in clutch so many times. It's not something you really want to rely on, but it's something that, for this build in particular, it can come in clutch. It can really come in and just like save the day, wipe the whole board, and be like, "Oh shit, blast chill happened." It's worth putting a point into. And if you're playing a lot of the chaos chambers or a lot of the boss rushes, with Butt Stallion, I've noticed you'll get a lot of points into Blast Chill and also a lot of points into Alchemical Agent. Like, so this will bump up. Like, I've seen Alchemical Agent with Butt Stallion buffs up to 40%. Like, I've seen 4 points into Alchemical Agent. I think the maximum I've seen in Blast Chill is 3. But, like, you can get some really crazy shit going down here. But again, a lot of this is stuff you've already seen in my previous builds. It's just really capitalizing on the things I mentioned earlier. You're capitalizing on movement speed, proximity to enemies. You're capitalizing on elemental damage. You're capitalizing on spell and melee damage buffs. Like, at the end of the day, these two trees, as much as I'd like to diverge from the norm of like melee builds, Stabbo Berserker is a really strong, really emphasis on the really strong build setup for what we're trying to do here. And I just think it works really well. Again, Borderlands and Wonderlands both are entirely subjective games, so if you want to fuck with this and change it and switch things around, by all means. I just wanted to give you an idea as to how I'm running it and the types of things I'm doing so you could see my setup and have a better understanding of how you may want to manipulate this moving forward. But yeah, that about covers the skill tree, so moving on to the build. All right, so last but not least, let's talk about the gear we've got going on with this build. So we're gonna try really fast to go through this. Again, I know I said we're gonna make this build video super quick, but doesn't look like that's happening. In any rate, all right. So we're running the Spellblade. All right. Now passives are not super critical. You're going to want to get as much as you can in melee damage, critical chance. Status effect chance is nice for this build. Warrior is cool because it staggers effects. But really, we're using the Spellblade because the Spellblade converts melee damage to spell damage. And again, as we mentioned earlier, it does not completely wipe melee damage from the picture. Both of these damage types factor into the overall damage calculation. So the Spellblade is probably one of the cornerstone pieces of the build, definitely something you want to get your hands on. Now, the Livewire. Any melee build that's worth its salt is going to run a Livewire. Moxie has all taught us that. Basically, for those of y'all that don't know, when we melee, the Livewire is going to shoot chains of lightning to other enemies. With our bonus status effect chance and with soaked, that's going to be awesome. It's not quite as awesome as it was back when the Livewire's chains did gun damage, because when they did gun damage, you could go into your Stabomancer skills and you could do follow up, and that would give you even more damage. But unfortunately, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that because that is no longer the case. They do melee damage now. But the Livewire is a great option for all melee builds. It's going to chain that lightning damage. It works really well with Soaked, so I strongly recommend you grab one. Now, the Stabomatic. New meta much. The Stabomatic is effectively the face puncher. It does a lot of really cool things. I'll probably put a video out on it specifically later. But we've got one with on spellcast melee damage is increased by 30% for 10 seconds because we're casting spells so frequently. We're just hitting heavy on the melee damage. Again, for those of y'all that have played Borderlands 3, it's a face puncher. For those of y'all that haven't played Borderlands 3, it's a gun that shoots melee damage. Really strong, really emphasis on the really relevant for this build. So we're running one. Now, the Queen's Cry. Queen's Cry is really strong. It's gotten a couple of buffs recently, but it also scales to spell damage. And since we're running the Spellblade and we're doing a lot of spell damage buffs, it just made sense to include one here. There's really not much else to say about that. It's cryo, so you're getting the soaked bonus. It helps you with your status effects, but really there's nothing much else to say. It scales to spell damage. It works with soaked. It's a good choice. Now, the delusion. The delusion we're running for boss fights in particular, it's a good way to get bosses soaked right off the jump so that they're taking bonus damage from lightning and cryo sources. That's really what we're running it for. You'll see in a lot of the clips from our intro that when we go up against a boss, we're starting out with the delusion. We're hitting him with the delusion. We have it in the fourth slot, so we can switch right back to the first slot with the live wire. Hit him with the delusion, soak him, start smacking away with the live wire. Does great damage. Absolutely fantastic. Would recommend. We're running mood rings here, one with melee, one with spell. We're focusing on action skill cooldown and action skill fucking duration, but at the same time, we're also focusing on melee critical hit damage and melee critical hit chance. Again, we're not running from the shadows as our primary action skill, so we're not guaranteed critical hits. So we're doing what we can to help bolster the amount of opportunities we have for melee critical hits and subsequently melee critical hit damage. So that is why we're running the mood rings that we're running. Now, you'll notice that we're running a bad egg. We have some curse wits on the save file if you want some, but the beauty of the bad egg, especially with Spike and Royd, is that, hey, guess what? I've got movement speed, which works with Swift Death, but I've also got bonus melee damage, and that bonus melee damage is dealing dark magic on top. So I can get a little bit of health regen, I can enhance my sustainability, but at the same time, I'm also bolstering that additive damage, which is so good. And when you're running Spike, you get the bonus 628 lightning damage. If you get meleeed while you're warded, you're getting that damage out there. Of course, it counts as lightning damage, so you're getting the bonuses if an enemy is soaked. And just all around, Bad Egg seemed like a better option. If you want to run a Cursed Wit, you've got several of them in the save file you can pick from, but I think the Bad Egg is the best choice. We're running a Tides here. Now, you have two Tides options. This particular one, all right. Now, both of them, let me backtrack a little bit. Both of them are spell damage, melee crit, and all damage dealt. But one of them is +5 into the old ways. And if you find yourself not wanting, to worry about like freezing enemies and getting bonus damage that way, and you just want to run +5 in the old ways and get damage because you're always up close and personal, smacking them in the face, by all means, cool deal, do that. But I also like having variety. And I think that Cold Snap in particular is a really fun skill to have. So we've got that here. But again, you do have some versatility if you want to change things around with regards to the tides. But the main reason we're running the tides again is because of Soaked. That's our main, what's the word I'm looking for here? Antagonizer. That's the main way we're getting enemies soaked is through crit hits. The delusion's nice, but crit hits are really the main way we're getting enemies soaked. And the more enemies we can have soaked a la Contagion, the more damage we're doing. So win-win. Now, I'm running a third here because I want to have my action skill, in this case Ghostblade, up as much as possible. The same thing applies if you're running Dreadwind, if you're running from the shadows. You want your action skill up as much as possible. So the Thurge gives you that ability to really get your action skill back super quick. You've also got cooldown rate up here and all damage dealt. Really emphasis on the really solid rolls for this one. Speaking of solid rolls, we're looking at frost damage and brr-zerker power here. So we're all in the clear. We are running a Buffmeister. The one thing I do want to say about the Buffmeister, even though I feel like most people know it by now, is that the Buffmeister we're running has Bonk and Zap. Bonk is giving you the melee damage bonus. Zap is giving you the spell damage bonus. Buffmeister's also giving you movement speed, which again works with Swift Death. It's also giving you the ability to transplant transplant elemental damage onto your weapon. So as much as I hate to say it because I know it's overused, everybody's running a Buffmeister. It's a really strong choice. You got a lot of other options over here. If there's anything you want to like substitute or anything you want to change, again, it's a fairly full backpack. You got a bunch of stuff that you can manipulate, change, alternate if you want to. but this is the gear that I'm running the build with. This is what I have seen the most success with. So if you want to start with this as a default and move on from this point, by all means. But I just wanted to show you what I was using to help this build reach the goals it had intended. But yeah, that's pretty much the gear. So yeah, that about concludes it for us today. Guys, I hope you really enjoyed the build. If you do like the build and you want to see more of this, I strongly encourage you to check us out over on Twitch. We do all sorts of build giveaways, all sorts of theory crafting. It's just a great chill spot with positive vibes. So if you want to hang out with us over on twitch.tv/H4XZZHD, again, link is down in the description. There's also a perma access Discord link down there if you want to get in on the Discord. Again, chill community, chill vibes. Be more than happy to have you. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say here, so I guess we're going to save ourselves the humiliation. We're going to go ahead and call it quits. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the community. Thank you all for everybody that's already a member of the Couch Tribe for being here. Much love to you. Air daps to you for being fucking awesome. And I guess I'll see you on the next one. Until then, keep spreading positivity, keep spreading kindness, and be the amazing human beings that you are. Alright? See you on the next build video. Peace.